Hello everyone, welcome to the very first lesson of the Pocket Japan channel. My name's Arno, and today we're gonna have to start with the beginning, so today I'm gonna talk about the Japanese writing system. You may or may not know that the Japanese writing system consists not of one, not of two, but of 4 different symbol systems, and I'm going to go over all 4 of these different writing systems in this video, very superficially, but I already want to warn you that this is going to be a lot of information for you to handle if you're new to the Japanese language. So don't get discouraged, it is really doable. I mean, a lot of people get through this part of the Japanese language. It's just going to be a lot of information, so I would recommend you to rewatch certain parts and take your time with it, because it's all very crucial and it's important that I do mention all of this in this one video. And also, at the end of every single video of mine, I'm also going to put a vocabulary section. In which I go over a couple of words that you're free to study if you want to. I mean, if you want to learn Japanese, I guess it would be handy if you already know a couple of words, because I'm going to use these words in the next videos onwards as I actually get to cover some real Japanese grammar. So you're free to study it. In the beginning, it's not going to be written in Japanese yet, so don't panic, it's all going to be doable. But first, let's watch the entire video, shall we? I'm going to cover the Japanese writing system. As you can see shown on the screen right now, this is what a random Japanese text looks like. Now you can see that 3 of the four symbol systems are being used in here. So you have the Hiragana, you have the Katakana, and you have the Kanji symbols. These are 3 different symbol systems, and then you have a 4th system as well, which is Romaji. It's basically writing Japanese down in our letters, but I'm going to talk about these 4 different systems in more detail separately in a couple of minutes. Now, some noticeable differences between these 3 groups that are shown right now is that kanji look much more complicated and more Chinese-like as compared to hiragana and katakana. Hiragana also looks more rounded if you compare it to katakana, which has more corners and straight lines, but it's true that a lot of these symbols that have the same pronunciation in hiragana and katakana, they actually do look alike, so I guess it's not that difficult to remember. Like, if you know hiragana, you will probably know a couple of katakana symbols now as well, because they don't differ that much. Now, let's talk about the very first group, the kana. I'm going to talk about the hiragana and katakana at the same time, because they are quite interlinked with each other, and it's important to know the difference between them. So the Japanese don't really have letters like we do. They construct their words with symbols that represent a set of syllables. Usually it's a consonant followed by a vowel, one of the 5 vowels, so you have a, I, U, E, and O. These are the 5 vowels that are usually preceded by a consonant, so you would have a, I, U, E, O, ka, ki, ku, ke, ko, sa, shi, su, se, so, etc., with all sorts of different consonants. So that's how they construct their words. They don't use our letters like we do. So you have 2 different groups in this category. You have the hiragana and katakana. This means that you can write every Japanese syllable in both the hiragana and katakana. So, for example, the sound so has a hiragana symbol and the katakana symbol, but they're used in different contexts. And these contexts are the following. Hiragana is used mostly for native Japanese words, whereas katakana is used mainly or in general for foreign words. Like, for example, a native Japanese word would be Nihongo. That is this Japanese word for Japanese. That would be written in hiragana because it's a word that originates from Japan. Most words are written in hiragana, but you can really tell the difference, because foreign words that are written in katakana, they usually come from English, and you can still kind of hear their English equivalent. Like, you have the word kurasu, which means class. So they basically took the English word and they kind of Japanified the pronunciation with their phonetic systems, like with their systems of syllables, and that's how they turned the word class into kurasu. Hiragana is also used to conjugate or end verbs and adjectives. For example, you have the verb to play, which has the stem aso, and then it's followed by a hiragana symbol to conjugate it. So you can have asobimasu, asobu, asubimashou, and all the different pronunciations and endings result in different tenses and different forms of the verb. So that's also where the hiragana is used. And lastly, hiragana is also used for particles. Now, don't really think too much about the verb conjugation and the particles right now, because I'm going to make separate videos about that. But for example, I go to Tokyo means that would be Tokyo ni ikimasu. The ni is a particle which indicates direction of where you're going. So this is when to use hiragana. Now, katakana, as I've already mentioned, are used for foreign words, for transcribing foreign words into Japanese. Like, for example, if you want to pronounce your name in Japanese, my name, for example, is Arno, I would have to write it down in the syllabic format of katakana. So that would be a plus ru plus no. So aruno is the transcription of my name, Arno. Now, katakana are also used to add a stress to a word. It's a little bit like our capital letter system. If you type something down in all caps, it also increases the loudness. So that's also when you can use katakana. And lastly, they use a lot of onomatopoeias in manga and anime, for example. And these onomatopoeias, or sounds that are written down, like, for example, the sound of a dog barking, you also write that in katakana. So as a recap, hiragana are used for Japanese words, are used for conjugating real words, for like adjectives and verbs. They're used for particles, and they are used most of the time. And katakana are a little less common, but they're still used quite a lot for onomatopoeias, for adding a stress to a word, and for writing down foreign words in a Japanese pronunciation. That's what they do. That's what the Japanese prefer to do. Like, they prefer to say kurasu rather than class, because it's more difficult for them to pronounce. So now we come to the kanji. Yeah, this is really a beast if you want to learn them all. This can take you years if you want to master all the kanji symbols, but it's important that you do if you want to become fully literate. Now, what are kanji signs? Basically, I'm going to explain it like this. Toddlers in kindergarten, they learn that the word for teacher in Japanese is sensei, and they first learn the hiragana and katakana in order to write basically anything down, so they write sensei like this. But as these children get into first grade, they start learning the kanji signs. So they learn that sensei also has its own kanji signs that are basically more adult. And adults use kanjis, whereas if you don't know the word, then you can just use hiragana and katakana as a sort of backup plan. So with words that have meaning on their own, I mean nouns, I mean the basic forms of verbs, and then they are usually conjugated with hiragana, as I've already said before. So you have the asobu, the verb to play, which I've already mentioned, as it actually has a kanji sign, so the aso part, this is the following kanji sign, whereas the hiragana makes it conjugated, if you know what I mean. But you don't have to worry about this yet. You can first take your time to learn the kana, the kanji. You can do this at your own pace. I am going to include the kanji in the vocabulary lists, so feel free to check that out. But I'm going to cover how to write down all the kana systems and how to use these fluently, and then we'll get to the kanji and to some real grammar and stuff. Now, how many kanji signs are there in the Japanese language? There are actually tens of thousands, but fortunately for us, they dumbed it down to 2,136 kanji signs. This is more commonly known as the Joyo kanji list, and was made to create a limit as to how many different kanji signs people could use in newspapers and stuff, because people had the problem that they couldn't even read books or newspapers because there were so many symbols that had the same meaning or slight meaning variations, and it was way too complicated. So that's why they decided to put a natural stop to it and say, okay, you can study more kanji signs if you want to, but you're only gonna have to know these in order to be considered literate. And lastly, you have the Romaji way of writing Japanese. This is basically writing down Japanese in our Roman letters, because a lot of people are too lazy, I suppose, or they're unable to learn Japanese symbols. I mean, it's really possible. I mean, it's just going to take a little bit of time, but I would say try to stop using Romaji as soon as possible and adopt the way of the Japanese way of writing, because even Japanese people, like, they don't think that they will understand it if you just write Romaji. I mean, everything in Japan is not written in Romaji. It's all written in at least kana or kanji, so be sure to not use Romaji all the time. Now, in my opinion, there are two important differences between two different styles. You have the Hepburn romanization and you have the literal romanization. The difference is that the Hepburn romanization style basically transcribes Japanese in the way you pronounce it, whereas the literal style of transcribing Japanese is basically transcribing it the way that you see or read the kana. For example, in the Hepburn way, the word for 10 days, toka, would be written the following way. it would be written like so. So with an O with a horizontal stripe above it to make it long. This works exactly the same way with a U, with an I, with an A. If you put a horizontal stripe above it, then it makes the vowel longer. But toka in the literal romanization style, it writes it down the way that the kana are written down. Now there is a danger of mispronouncing it if you transcribe it in the literal way. If you're not too familiar with the Japanese language yet, then you may read this as touka instead of toka. So touka. You may read the to and the u and the u as separate signs, but it's actually a way of lengthening the vowel. But we're going to see that in the next lessons when I handle the Hiragana and Katakana. So yeah, there is a danger of mispronouncing it if you go for the literal way of transcribing it, but there is not a danger if you go for the Hepburn tradition. So that's basically it. I am actually personally more of a fan of the literal way of literal way of transcribing it because it looks less ugly in my opinion. But I understand that for new people, it's probably best to use the Hepburn way of writing long vowels, so I'm gonna stick with the Hepburn tradition. Now, to differentiate between Hiragana and Katakana, Hiragana is usually written down in small case letters, such as the word for fall or autumn. That would be haru, and that would be written in small case letters. Katakana is used to, katakana is indicated if you use capital letters in Romaji. Like, for example, the word for football. I mean, it's an English word, and if you pronounce it in the Japanese way, it would be futtoboru. And this is how you write it in Romaji, so it's just like capital letters. However, I would say, don't rely on the Romaji. Learn the kana and the kanji instead. Like, it's really nice to be able to see how it's written in the Romaji, but I would try to adopt the kana as soon as possible, because it will only hold you down if you stick with the Romaji. No one uses Romaji in Japan. Japanese people use kana for simple things, and they use kanji when they can, so they never use Romaji. And if you hand them a full text written in Romaji, they will probably not even understand a single thing, because a lot of Japanese people are not that well gifted when it comes to the Roman alphabet. So yeah, only foreigners write in Romaji. It's up to you whether you want to work really hard in order to completely drop the Romaji and let it behind you. I would recommend that you try to do that as soon as possible. Now, anyway, this was the very first video. Now comes the vocabulary part, so please stick around. For the first vocabulary list, I figured that I should not go over the basic words like tree and woman and house and stuff like that. I should probably first introduce you to some of the most common Japanese expressions, such as greetings and saying farewell and stuff like that. So that's probably more important at this point rather than the word for dog and cat. So that's why I decided to first do that. It may seem a little intimidating at first, but these are very common expressions, and you probably already know a lot of them if you watch anime, so it's doable, it really is. Okay, now let's get started. I should stop dilly-dallying, as people say, and let's go for the first word. So the first word is good morning. It's something you say when you wake up, most logically, and that in Japanese is ohayou gozaimasu. Ohayou gozaimasu. Ohayou gozaimasu. Yeah, try to look at how the word is written and notice that the su at the end is actually not really pronounced as su, but just as an s. You can say ohayou gozaimasu, but that's kind of feminine. It sounds rather feminine if you say ohayou gozaimasu, kind of playful, but the neutral pronunciation is ohayou gozaimasu. Also notice how the second o on ohayou, the first word, has a horizontal stripe above it. This means that you should also try to lengthen that part of lengthen that vowel a little bit more than the others. So it's ohayou gozaimasu, not ohayou gozaimasu or something. Ohayou gozaimasu. Okay, that's the first word. The second word is good day. That's konnichiwa. Now, as you can see, there are two N's standing there in Romaji, which means that you should not say konnichiwa. That's too short. You have to try to lengthen the N's a little bit because there are two N's after each other right there. So you have konnichiwa. Try to pronounce the N sound rather vigorously. So konnichiwa. Then you have good evening, which is rather similar in structure. It's konbanwa. Don't try to pronounce the N sound too sharply. It's also not very practical. You can probably feel it if you were to say konbanwa. It doesn't sound very Japanese now, would it? So it's konbanwa. Konbanwa. Then you have the fourth word, that's good night. Oyasumi nasai. Oyasumi nasai. It's pronounced as oyasumi nasai. try to remember. Hopefully the pronunciation is going to help you with hopefully it's going to help you develop a feeling as to how these words are pronounced, because after a while you won't need me to pronounce all the words for you out loud. And next we have goodbye. In Japanese that would be sayonara. Sayonara. Now you can also make the yo sound shorter, as you can see right now, I lengthened it. You can actually choose, you can make it a long vowel, so sayonara, or you can make it a shorter one, which would be sayonara. But don't say sayonara or something, say sayonara. And try to pronounce the R in the Japanese way. But I'm going to cover the pronunciation of every single sound in Japanese in a separate video, but try to say this, sayonara. That's how I pronounce it. Now next we have something that you say when you leave the house. In English you wouldn't really say much, but in Japan you would say something. You would say ittekimasu, ittekimasu, ittekimasu. Now notice how the s sound at the end, just like with ohayo gozaimasu, is not really pronounced. It's, you can pronounce it again, but it sounds more feminine and more playful. It's up to you whether you want to do it or not, but I would say stick with the neutral pronunciation for now. Try to say it out loud after me. Ittekimasu. And then when the person who stays at home and watches someone leave, that person would say something like "return safely." Again, the people don't really say that in English culture and Western culture, but in Japan they do say something. They say "itterashai." Now you may notice that both "I'm leaving" and "return safely" or something along those lines, both actually have the same beginning. So you have "ittekimasu" and "itterashai." Actually comes from the same verb, but that's not for now. Now, when you come home, you also say something. You say tadaima, tadaima, tadaima. Now in anime, they often say like tadaima and make it really long and stuff. But just try to stick with the neutral pronunciation for now. And next you have okaeri nasai, okaeri nasai, okaeri nasai. Now try not to pronounce that E sound in Romaji. Try not to pronounce it as an I or an E sound. It's actually the letter E, so it should be pronounced as E. So it's okaeri nasai, not okaeri nasai. It's okaeri nasai. Try to pronounce it the way I do. Now next you have excuse me. It's something you say when you have to bother someone to ask the way, or when you want to apologize loosely. Then you would say sumimasen, sumimasen. Now again with the N sound, you're gonna have to develop a feeling for that, but it's really not that hard. Like in general, just don't pronounce it too strongly. It's not sumimasen, but it's sumimasen. That's how people pronounce it. And then, well, we're nearing the end. Fortunately for you, then you have something you say like see you tomorrow, like till tomorrow. It's something you say to your friends, for example, in a school context. Then you would say mata ashita, mata ashita, mata ashita. Now again, you may notice that it's actually written as ashita or something, but it's actually pronounced as ashita. That's something very common in Japanese. It's a little different, but it's really easy to get a feeling for that. So don't think that it's not doable, because it really is. So you say mata ashita. Something very similar, it's it means see you later. Instead of ashita, you add atode. So you say mata atode, mata atode, mata atode, which means see you later. Now the atto actually means later, whilst the ashita from the previous word actually means tomorrow. So see you tomorrow, mata ashita, and see you later, mata atode. Now you can also make that a little more informal, see you later, and that would be mata ne, or ja mata ne, ja ne. You're pretty free in that regard. Like you can say pretty much any of these things, and it would all be the same. It would all be see you later. But if you want to be somewhat neutral or formal, then you would have to say mata atode. Mata atode. That's what you say. Okay, so much for the first vocabulary list. I'm sorry that it took a while to cover it, but these are some very important expressions, and it's very important that you do somewhat know how and when to use it and stuff. So instead of just dryly saying like, okay, good morning, ohayo gozaimasu, good day, konnichiwa. I mean, yeah, that way it would only take like 1 minute, but I feel like I should probably spend a little bit of time explaining the context and stuff. So thank you very much for watching this somewhat longer video. It's very long to begin with, but usually my lessons will only be like 8 to 10 minutes, ideally, so it won't be that long anymore in the future. I just had a lot to say. Okay, now, thank you guys for watching. Please leave a comment saying what you think. If you have any advice on how I can improve, please feel free to tell me. I would definitely want to improve my videos even more. I'm still kind of getting the hang of it, but I think I'm doing a pretty good job so far. I'll definitely try to make it even better and more enjoyable for you in the future. Yeah, feel free to check out the document in the description. That's a document to the vocabulary list, as I've already said. Thank you for watching, and goodbye!